"I can't listen to this anymore, it's destroying my life," whispered 33-year-old composer Marcus Williams as he stared at his computer screen at 2:45 a.m., his fingers trembling over the keyboard as he tried to delete the most beautiful piece of music he had ever created. For the past 18 months, Marcus had been secretly working on a symphony inspired by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's incredible comeback from a devastating ankle injury that had threatened to end his career. What started as a personal creative project had evolved into a musical masterpiece that captured the emotional journey of resilience, hope, and triumph in ways that Marcus had never achieved before in his 15-year career as a composer. But what Marcus didn't know was that his obsession with perfecting the symphony was slowly destroying his relationships, his health, and his sanity, while creating a piece of music that would eventually be recognized as one of the most powerful artistic tributes to athletic recovery ever composed. The problem wasn't that the music was bad, it was that Marcus's pursuit of capturing Shai's comeback in musical form had become so consuming that he was losing himself in the process of creating something that might change both their lives forever. But let me take you back to where this musical obsession began, because the story of how one athlete's comeback inspired a composer to create his life's work starts with a broken man watching basketball alone in his apartment and discovering that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the deepest pain. The date was October 15, 2022, and Marcus Williams sat in his cluttered home studio in Nashville, Tennessee, surrounded by musical instruments, composition software, and empty coffee cups that served as monuments to his recent creative struggles. At 33 years old, Marcus had built a respectable career composing music for independent films, theater productions, and the occasional commercial project, but he had been experiencing the worst creative dry spell of his professional life. For 8 months, Marcus had been unable to write anything that felt meaningful or emotionally authentic. His compositions felt mechanical, his melodies lacked soul, and his previous passion for creating music had been replaced by a grinding routine of forcing uninspired notes onto paper just to meet deadlines and pay bills. "I used to create music that moved people," Marcus said to himself as he stared at his blank composition screen. "Now I can barely write a jingle that doesn't put me to sleep." Marcus's creative crisis had coincided with a series of personal setbacks that had left him feeling isolated and disconnected from the emotional sources that had always fueled his best work. A relationship had ended badly, several promising projects had been cancelled, and his financial situation had become precarious enough that he was considering abandoning composition altogether. That night, exhausted from another unproductive day in the studio, Marcus turned on his television hoping to find something mindless that would help him fall asleep. Instead, he found himself watching a documentary about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's recovery from the ankle injury that had sidelined him for 4 months during the previous season. What Marcus saw in that documentary would begin the most intense and transformative creative period of his life. The documentary detailed Shai's journey from the moment of injury, a devastating ankle fracture that required surgery and threatened to derail his ascending career, through months of rehabilitation, doubt, and gradual recovery. But what captured Marcus's attention wasn't just the physical comeback, but the emotional arc of the story. Marcus watched Shai describe the darkest moments of his recovery, when pain and uncertainty made him question whether he would ever play basketball again. He saw footage of Shai working through rehabilitation exercises with grim determination, pushing through setbacks and plateaus that would have broken most people's spirit. But what moved Marcus most was witnessing Shai's gradual transformation from despair to hope, from doubt to confidence, and finally to a level of performance that exceeded even his pre-injury capabilities. "This is a symphony," Marcus whispered to himself as the documentary concluded. "This journey from devastation to triumph, from silence to music again, this is exactly what I've been trying to capture in my compositions." For the first time in months, Marcus felt the familiar surge of creative energy that had driven his best work. However, what Marcus didn't anticipate was that his decision to compose a symphony inspired by Shai's comeback would become an all-consuming obsession that would test every aspect of his mental, emotional, and physical endurance. Marcus began researching Shai's injury and recovery with the intensity of a medical student preparing for finals. He studied the biomechanics of ankle injuries, read about the psychology of athletic recovery, and watched every available video of Shai's rehabilitation process and return to competition. "I need to understand every emotional nuance of this journey," Marcus told himself as he filled notebooks with details about different phases of Shai's recovery. "If I'm going to capture this in music, I need to feel what he felt at every stage." Marcus structured his symphony in 4 movements, each representing a different phase of Shai's journey: the fall, the injury and initial despair; the silence, the dark period of uncertainty and pain; the awakening, the gradual return of hope and strength, and the resurrection, the triumphant return to elite performance. But Marcus's approach to composition became more intense and detailed than anything he had attempted before. He spent weeks crafting musical phrases that captured specific emotions, using complex harmonies and rhythmic patterns to represent the physical and psychological aspects of recovery. Every note has to serve the story, Marcus said during one of his 14-hour composition sessions. Every harmony has to reflect the emotional reality of what Shai experienced. Marcus's dedication to perfection began consuming every aspect of his life. He stopped taking on other projects, ignored social obligations, and worked on the symphony for 12 to 16 hours a day, driven by an obsession with creating something worthy of the story that had inspired it. However, what happened as Marcus delved deeper into the symphony's composition would reveal the dangerous intersection between artistic passion and psychological fixation. As months passed, Marcus's pursuit of musical perfection became increasingly isolated and compulsive. He lost touch with friends, stopped maintaining his apartment, and survived on minimal sleep and poor nutrition while pouring every ounce of his creative energy into the symphony. "I can't stop now," Marcus would tell himself during moments when exhaustion and doubt crept in. Shai didn't give up during his recovery, and I can't give up on capturing his story in music. Marcus began experiencing symptoms of creative obsession that worried the few people who still had contact with him. He would work for days without leaving his studio, forget to eat meals, and wake up at his keyboard after falling asleep while composing. His few remaining friends expressed concern about his health and isolation, but Marcus dismissed their worries as misunderstanding of the artistic process. "You don't understand what I'm creating," Marcus told his friend David during one of their rare conversations. "This symphony is going to be my masterpiece. It's going to honor Shai's journey in ways that no other art form could capture." But Marcus's obsession with perfection was creating music that was indeed extraordinary, even as it was destroying his ability to maintain any semblance of normal life. The symphony Marcus was creating was unlike anything he had ever composed. The first movement, the Fall, used jarring dissonance and sudden dynamic shifts to capture the shock and devastation of injury. The second movement, the Silence, employed sparse, haunting melodies that conveyed the isolation and uncertainty of recovery. But it was the third and fourth movements where Marcus's composition reached levels of emotional depth and technical sophistication that surprised even him. The Awakening built slowly from quiet hope to growing strength, while the Resurrection culminated in triumphant musical themes that seemed to capture the joy and power of complete recovery. "This is the best work I've ever done," Marcus acknowledged during one of his rare moments of objective self-assessment. "But I'm losing myself in the process of creating it." However, what happened when Marcus finally completed the symphony after 18 months of obsessive work would force him to confront the personal cost of his artistic achievement. When Marcus played the completed symphony for the first time, he experienced something that he had never felt before in his career, the recognition that he had created something truly exceptional that had also nearly destroyed him in the process. The symphony was 47 minutes of music that told Shai's comeback story with emotional authenticity and technical brilliance that exceeded Marcus's previous capabilities as a composer. But Marcus himself was physically exhausted, socially isolated, and emotionally depleted from the intensity of the creative process. "I created something beautiful," Marcus realized as he listened to the playback. "But I don't know if I can survive creating anything this intense ever again." Marcus's completion of the symphony coincided with his recognition that his obsessive approach to composition had become unsustainable and potentially dangerous to his mental and physical health. "I need to find a way to share this music," Marcus thought as he considered his next steps. "But I also need to find a way to reconnect with the world I've been ignoring for the past year and a half." Marcus made the decision to reach out to Shai directly, hoping to share the symphony that had been inspired by his comeback story and to find some closure for the creative obsession that had dominated his life. But what happened when Marcus contacted Shai would lead to an unexpected collaboration that would help Marcus understand the difference between healthy artistic passion and destructive creative obsession. Marcus sent a carefully written email to Shai's management team, explaining his symphony project and requesting the opportunity to share the music that had been inspired by Shai's recovery journey. "I've spent 18 months creating a symphony that attempts to capture the emotional arc of your comeback from injury," Marcus wrote. "I would be honored to share this music with you, not because I want anything in return, but because your story gave me the inspiration to create something that I believe honors your journey." Marcus didn't expect a response, but 3 days later, he received a call from Shai's representative requesting a meeting to hear the symphony. When Shai listened to Marcus's composition, His response was immediate and powerful. "This is incredible," Shai said as the final movement concluded. "You captured feelings that I experienced but could never put into words. This music tells my story better than I could tell it myself." But what impressed Shai even more than the musical quality was learning about the intensity and dedication that Marcus had brought to the project. "You spent 18 months of your life creating this for me?" Shai asked, clearly moved by the commitment Marcus had demonstrated. Marcus nodded, then found himself explaining the personal cost of his creative obsession, the isolation, the health problems, and the way his pursuit of artistic perfection had nearly consumed his entire life. "I needed to create something worthy of your story," Marcus explained. "But I think I lost myself in the process of trying to capture your recovery." Shai's response would help Marcus understand how his artistic process and Shai's athletic recovery had actually shared important similarities. "Marcus, what you're describing sounds a lot like what I went through during my rehabilitation," Shai said thoughtfully. "I became so obsessed with getting back to basketball that I forgot about everything else in my life. I had to learn that recovery wasn't just about returning to my previous level, it was about becoming a more complete person." This conversation led to a collaboration between Marcus and Shai that would help the composer understand how to channel his artistic passion in healthier and more sustainable ways. However, what happened when Marcus and Shai began working together on presenting the symphony would demonstrate how artistic collaboration could enhance both their understanding of creativity and recovery. Shai suggested that they present the symphony as part of a multimedia performance that would combine Marcus's music with visual elements and spoken narrative about the recovery process. The goal would be to create an artistic experience that could inspire other people who were facing their own challenges and setbacks. "Your symphony tells my physical recovery story," Shai explained. "But together we could create something that helps people understand that recovery, whether from injury, creative blocks, or personal setbacks, is possible when you approach it with the right support and perspective." Marcus was excited by the collaborative possibility, but he was also concerned about returning to the obsessive work patterns that had characterized his symphony composition. "I want to work on this project," Marcus told Shai. "But I need to find a way to create without losing myself in the process again." Shai's response revealed how his own recovery experience had taught him about the importance of balance and sustainable approaches to pursuing excellence. "The most important thing I learned during my comeback was that sustainable success requires taking care of yourself throughout the process, not just focusing on the end goal," Shai said. "Maybe we can create something incredible while also making sure you maintain your health and relationships." This philosophy became the foundation for their collaborative approach to developing the multimedia presentation. Marcus and Shai worked together to create Resurrection, a symphony of recovery, a performance that combined Marcus's musical composition with visual storytelling, spoken narrative, and audience interaction designed to inspire people facing various forms of personal challenges. But unlike Marcus's previous solitary obsession, this collaboration emphasized sustainable creative practices, regular breaks, and maintaining connection with others throughout the creative process. "Working with Shai taught me that great art doesn't have to come from suffering or isolation," Marcus reflected during the development process. "Sometimes the best creativity comes from collaboration, support, and maintaining perspective about what really matters." The premiere of Resurrection, a symphony of recovery, was held at the Oklahoma City Performing Arts Center, with proceeds benefiting organizations that supported people recovering from various forms of trauma and setbacks. The performance was attended by athletes, artists, medical professionals, and community members who were inspired by the combination of Marcus's musical storytelling and Shai's message about resilience and recovery. But what moved Marcus most was seeing how his symphony, when presented in collaboration with Shai and in service of helping others, had become something more meaningful than he could have created through solitary obsession. "This music has found its purpose," Marcus said during the post-performance reception. "It was always meant to be shared and to serve something larger than my own artistic ambitions." The success of their collaboration led to Marcus being commissioned to create additional musical works that explored themes of recovery, resilience, and human potential, but with the sustainable creative practices he had learned through working with Shai. Marcus also became an advocate for artist mental health, speaking about the dangers of creative obsession and the importance of maintaining balance while pursuing artistic excellence. "The most important thing I learned is that sustainable creativity requires taking care of yourself throughout the process," Marcus would explain during artist wellness workshops. "Great art doesn't have to cost you your health, relationships, or sanity." 3 years after completing his symphony, Marcus published a book titled Composing Recovery: Music, Obsession and the Art of Sustainable Creativity, that became required reading in music composition programs and artist development courses. During book tour events, Marcus would always acknowledge how Shai's story had inspired his most important work while also teaching him crucial lessons about the difference between healthy artistic passion and destructive creative obsession. Shai's comeback didn't just inspire my symphony, Marcus would explain during interviews. It taught me that true recovery, whether from injury, creative blocks, or personal setbacks, requires building something sustainable rather than just achieving a momentary triumph. Years later, when young composers asked Marcus for advice about pursuing ambitious creative projects, he would always tell them about the symphony that nearly destroyed him and the athlete who taught him how to create sustainably. The most important lesson I learned is that extraordinary art can come from extraordinary dedication, but only when that dedication includes taking care of yourself and maintaining connections with others, Marcus would explain. Isolation and obsession might produce great work, but collaboration and balance produce great work that enhances your life rather than consuming it. And in his studio, Marcus kept the original handwritten score of his Shai symphony alongside photos from their collaborative performances, with a note he had written to himself. The best art serves purposes larger than the artist's ego, and the healthiest creativity enhances life rather than replacing it. The composer who wrote a song about Shai's comeback had discovered that his greatest musical achievement was also his most important lesson about the difference between artistic passion and creative obsession, and that the most meaningful art often comes from learning to balance extraordinary dedication with sustainable practices and human connection. But Marcus's story with Shai was far from over. 2 years after their successful collaboration, Shai approached Marcus with a request that would challenge the composer to apply his newfound understanding of sustainable creativity to an even more ambitious project. "Marcus, I've been thinking about expanding our work together," Shai said during a meeting in Marcus's now organized and balanced studio. "What if we created a comprehensive program that uses music and athletics to help young people develop resilience and recovery skills before they face major setbacks?" Marcus was intrigued by the possibility but also aware of his tendency toward creative obsession when working on projects that excited him. "That sounds incredible," Marcus replied. "But I need to make sure I approach it in a way that enhances rather than consumes my life." This conversation would lead to the establishment of the Resilience Through Art and Athletics program, which combined musical composition, athletic training, and mentorship to help young people develop the mental and emotional skills necessary for recovering from various forms of adversity. Marcus served as the program's creative director, developing musical curricula that taught students to express their experiences through composition while learning about the parallels between artistic creation and athletic recovery. "What we're creating isn't just about music or sports," Marcus explained during the program's launch. "It's about teaching young people that challenges are opportunities for growth when approached with the right support, perspective, and sustainable practices." The program became a model for arts-based resilience education and was adopted by schools, community centers, and youth organizations across the country. Marcus and Shai's collaboration showed us that when artists and athletes work together with shared values and sustainable practices, they can create programs that serve communities in ways that neither could achieve alone, noted youth development specialist Dr. Sarachin. 5 years after writing his first symphony about Shai's comeback, Marcus had become a recognized expert in using music to support resilience and recovery, while maintaining the balanced lifestyle and healthy relationships that his collaboration with Shai had taught him to prioritize. During a joint interview reflecting on their partnership, Marcus and Shai discussed how their work together had taught them both important lessons about the relationship between excellence and sustainability. "Marcus taught me that artistic passion and athletic dedication share the same potential for both extraordinary achievement and destructive obsession," Shai said. "Learning to create and compete sustainably is actually more challenging than learning to excel through pure intensity." Marcus nodded. "And Shai taught me that true recovery, whether from creative blocks or athletic injuries, isn't just about returning to your previous level. It's about becoming more complete and balanced than you were before the challenge occurred." Their collaboration had proven that when artists and athletes share insights about excellence, recovery, and sustainable practices, they can create work and programs that serve purposes much larger than individual achievement, and that the most important creative partnerships are the ones that enhance both collaborators' lives while serving others. In his final reflection on his journey from obsessive composer to balanced artist and educator, Marcus wrote, "The symphony that nearly destroyed me became the foundation for work that has enhanced countless lives, including my own. The difference was learning to create in collaboration rather than isolation, and to serve purposes larger than personal artistic achievement. The story of Marcus and Shai had become more than just a tale of artistic inspiration. It had become a blueprint for how creative and athletic excellence could be pursued sustainably while serving communities and fostering the kind of resilience that helps people transform challenges into opportunities for growth.